The men's panel. The men's panel. We moved from the second chance to the men's panel, or the second chance to the, or the, from the second chance to the men's panel, or from the men's panel to the second chance. And in the event, men have dramatically been undermined in our society. Afro-American men in particular. As a result, President Barack Obama also addressed I Am My Brother's Keeper program, a new program that this administration is now working on and actually trying to bring to the immediate community. Now, Barack Obama, this is my message to the president. Realistically speaking, I lived this life. I've been here since 1992, habilitating myself. I can't say I'm rehabilitating myself because in order to rehabilitate myself, I have to first be habilitated. And we did the research on the word rehabilitation, just to understand or determine where this stuff fits in with the penal institution. And I started in the penal institution as a youth in the early 80s. It took me a total decade and a half to get out of the institution in itself from a psychological and then a physical composition, which I am still entrapped in as a result of the past, which many refuse to even recognize. After training, vocational training, after job skills, security, personnel, and mind you, that's one of the lowest levels of employment that they issue to the males, which they are now pushing off to foreigners. But anyway, security, compound by at least GED and associate's degree. Still, no employment. Now, for you to come into the community and provide services to men, employment, housing, shelter, and things of that nature, you need to understand the true element of the male's opposition in the community. He may be a father. He's unemployed. He's homeless. He's in need of psychological, physical, and emotional structuring in his life. How do you provide all these things? First off, he has to begin to provide them for himself. Should he fail to provide them for himself, at least in his very thinking or his very train of thought, then whatever assistance that you provide will be useless because he is not prepared nor mentally ready to establish that for himself in his own life. So am I my brother's keeper? Of course I am. I spent the last 20 years trying to determine and find out what could be beneficial to our development and growth after we have been struck down by handicaps such as incarceration. We're going to hold that thought, but we're going to go back to the Second Chance program and see what the community had to say about all this. And then
so many of you that have participated has just helped tremendously make this a very valuable week. And this panel will be next in that series that we'll add. National Action Network, at the crux of what we do, is so much of the crisis work and, of course, the work engaging the criminal justice system. And we could not have a convention unless we really touched on issues that affect so many of us, particularly in our community where the criminal justice system, unfortunately, touches almost every family in different ways. And so we're really proud to have this panel. Yesterday, because of the president, we had a panel scheduled on trial work with some of the top trial lawyers in the country. But because of the president and the Secret Service and all of that, we had to move that panel to some future day. But I'm really proud today because we know all of the challenges that people face, particularly those that have been through the system and what it takes to recover from that. And Victor Payne, who heads the Second Chance program at National Action Network, has been a true champion. He has brought his leadership to this issue.
Empowered and educated as to what needs to be done to reform our criminal justice system. The way it is now cannot continue to go on and continue to exist the way it is. There's too many people in jail, there's too many of us in jail, and our tax dollars could be well spent in other areas. And those areas will definitely be spoken about in this panel today. I brought together a group of people that I've known in the various movements, that I'm personally involved with in various campaigns, and I'm quite sure that the information they're about to give you will definitely empower and inspire you to become involved and to become knowledgeable about what needs to be done to reform our criminal justice system. So without further ado, I'm going to turn this portion of the program over to my moderator, Ms. Yolanda Johnson-Peterkin, who is a colleague of mine, and I'm so happy to have her here to help me get through this event right now. Ms. Yolanda Johnson-Peterkin.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. How are you? You will certainly be able to hear me, and many of the panelists already know that. How are you? Everybody okay? Yeah. All right, so we're going to get through our panel and make sure we have a wonderful evening and get some information, and then we're going to go home. Is that right? Yeah. Absolutely. I can't see people, so let me know if anyone is sleeping, because I am going to wake them up. My name is Yolanda Johnson-Peterkin. I'm the Director of Operations for the Women's Prison Association, which is the largest organization for women only in New York City, giving honoring services to women who are both incarcerated and also formerly incarcerated. That is the language of today. We can use returning citizens if you like, but we are talking about women only services. I am honored to have on our panel with us today Mr. Terrell Muhammad, who is from, three people are clapping, Terrell. Project Associate, Prison Visiting Project, Correctional Association of New York. We also have Mr. Eddie Rosario, who's also a friend of mine. I didn't hear anybody clap. Prison Visiting Project of Correctional Association of New York. We also have Laura, who's also a friend of mine. They're all hanging out together. Organizer, Release Aging People from the Prison Campaign. Judith Brink. From the Prison Action Network, editor of Building Bridges. Barbara Ennis. Executive Director, Sparkle of Joy Ministries. Hallelujah. Rosa Saldana. I was given instructions to read each one's bio. That will not happen because I don't really follow rules. So all at the same time, let's give everybody a round of applause. Information is what we need in order to have a movement. Right. Information is what we need in order to have a movement, and there are various parts of the criminal justice system and the system itself that we need to work on in order to have a movement. So Judith, what is the Safe Parole Act?
Oh dear.
I get right to the meat of it.
Great. Well, the Safe Parole Act is an attempt to rein in the outrageous behavior of New York State Parole Board. I don't know how many people in this room are familiar with what they're doing. In my opinion, there's two main things. They're not following the law, which makes parole hearings, in my opinion, a total farce. When men and women are sitting in front of the parole board who they know are breaking the law. And then they get a decision from that parole board, who is not following the law, that they are not going to release them because it would deprecate the seriousness of the crime. I think the parole board is deprecating the seriousness of the crime. The other thing they're doing, and the main thing that the Safe Parole Act is focused on, is changing the law to make it tighter and to prevent the parole board from continuing what I think is cruel and unusual torture of deciding that a person's sentence wasn't long enough and therefore denying them parole for 2 more years over and over and over again, so that a person doesn't have any idea when they're going to get out of prison, and they don't know what they can do in order to get out of prison, because everything they've done, all the changes they've made, I mean, this is the second chance, right? We're the second chance people in this room. We believe in second chances. And that's what the parole board's supposed to be evaluating, whether somebody's ready to come back to their families and their communities. And instead of basing their decision on the evidence of a person's readiness or not, they're basing their decisions on the nature of the crime. And they've already done their time. A judge has decided, a sentencing judge has given them a sentence, and so now the parole board doesn't like that sentence, so they're deciding what it should be. I want to read you one thing. I don't know how many of you have heard about the Center for Constitutional Rights. Yep. But a few months ago, in January, the parole board, who had not followed the law that they're supposed to be following, made an effort at correcting that, and they filed some procedures with the State Department. It's too complicated for me to go into it, but they were doing this legal process to change, to accommodate the law. And it was a farce. It really wasn't what it was supposed to be. And it caused outrage from so many people in this state. Over hundreds of people sent in comments during the public comment period. Usually 30 is a big number for people to comment on rules and regs. I mean, how many of us ever even know there are some rules and regs to comment on, right? They got hundreds of these. And I want to read something from what the Center for Constitutional Rights says. There's an international covenant on civil and political rights, and the United States is a treaty to that international covenant. And this is what the CCR says about it. Parole practices must comply with Article 9 of the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, which states, everyone has the right to liberty and security of person. No one shall be subjected to arbitrary arrest or detention. Yeah. Arbitrary detention has been determined to include elements of inappropriateness, injustice, and this one, lack of predictability. This means that the criteria for conditional release should be clear and explicit in order to comply with that regulation. International law has concluded that prolonged detention without the opportunity for release and sentences that effectively result in life without parole due to perpetual parole denials constitute human rights violations of torture and inhuman or degrading treatment or punishment and violate the right to human dignity. And this is why I have committed 14 years going on. I have a life sentence too, because this bill is going to pass or I'm going to die. One of them is going to happen first. I have copies, I have a chart of the Safe Parole Act. You can come up and find out what exactly it does. I'll be happy to answer any questions. Just wanted to give you an oversight of what I'm talking about. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Judith. We also want to say thank you to the National Action Network for having all of us here to have this opportunity to gain some information for the new myth. Isn't that correct? Nobody knows who's the next person I'm going to ask a question. It's very interesting to me. That makes everybody nervous. I like that. Yeah, I like that. Terrell, Mohammed, what do you do in your everyday life to change the conditions of prison? He doesn't know that I was going to ask him that question. This is going to be great.
Well, I helped head a campaign to stop isolation in New York State. That's one of the things. In my campaign, I have a coalition of over maybe 60 organizations. We're equal in numbers, like 30,000 people. And we have legislation that we have presented, or we're trying to present, to stop what we call torture. Juan Mendez, who's a UN rapporteur. A UN rapporteur is a person that does fact-finding missions for the UN. And he went to Afghanistan prison, Guantanamo, other prisons around the world to study isolation and torture. And he says that anything over 15 days in isolation is considered torture. So if that's what he sees across seas, and the UN and the United States abide by that, then they're practicing torture right here in New York State. They have children, women, elderly, the mentally ill, the lesbian gay community in isolation in New York State. And I fight against that every single day, 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, because I am a person who experienced that degradation. So I would refuse to be out here and not fighting that battle on the ground floor. The communities at large really need to be in here packed, because Brownsville, East New York, Crown Heights, Flatbush, the Bronx, Harlem, all of our loved ones at one time or another are going to be affected by this criminal justice system. And once they get there, how do we want them to not only be treated, but how do we want them to return? See, when we go to prison because of problematic behavior. But when we get there, there's nothing to address that behavior. And it's exacerbated when you're being punished and abused and tortured. So then when you come back to the community, you come back to the community more damaged than when you went in. So we always want to know what happened to little Raekwon and them. Why they still at 35 acting like they're 16. See, these are the things that we ask ourselves, but we don't know why. Why did he always keep going back? There's psychological damage being done to us under those conditions. That brother or sister who went away is not the same person who comes home. But how do we want them to come home? See, that's the question. And we have the power to change that. See, we're taxpayers, but we don't really question how our money is being spent. I always tell the brother on the corner, I said, well, let's put money together and get a business. First thing we're going to ask, who's going to control the money? But I said also, let's get down some weed and some liquor. Nobody question who's going to control the money. If you notice that, seriously, all we want to know is it's going to be good or where we're going to get it. You see, this is the damage that affects us. And we have to question this. We really have to be involved on our community boards. When we go see loved ones up there, we have to take an aptitude test. Find out what's really going on with them. Don't just go up there and just have a meaningful moment, but actually speak to them and say, are you getting the treatment you need? Are you reading? Do they have education here? Do I need to send you some books? Because when they come home, you want them to not go back. You want them better off than when they left. And that's not happening. 40% of the people that return go back to prison. That means that something's wrong. 97% of the people that return, they come back to the community they leave. So they're coming back. Let's understand that they're coming back. They're not coming back debriefed. They're not coming back with any what we call psychological treatment. They're just being thrown back into the community. And then when their behavior magnifies itself, and he don't or she don't know what's wrong, because understand something. When you're under psychological torture, you don't know how it's going to manifest itself. You see, you really don't until you get out here. really look at that. And that's what I do every day, matter of fact.
Thank you very much. Brother Terrell, we're gonna implement something behind your what you do every day. When I say movement, it's time to bring it to a close. Because we want to make sure everybody has an opportunity. But moreover, we want to make sure that you have an opportunity to leave here today with your information for your movement. Speak to me a little bit about Sparks of Joy Ministry. How does that lend to the prison industrial complex?
Hi, my name is Barbara Ennis, Sparkles of Joy Ministries. Hi, my name is Barbara Ennis, and Sparkles of Joy Ministries. Whenever I hear ministries, I hear helping others. So what I do is I help people integrate with integration and reentry back into the community. I also use the visiting room as a place to go in and talk to my brothers and sisters that's behind the walls. These are people like us that one time in their life has made a decision that changed the dynamics of their life. They go and they get their decision denied, and you just stuck to this next 2 years in the same situation, same condition. You might write a bill and say they deny your bill, and it's just a vicious cycle. And like Terrell said, it becomes abusive. The system is abusing those that's behind the walls by not letting them out. And mind you, it's a big political thing that's going on, industry. It's a lot of, they talk about the taxpayers' money that's, they're paying so much money to keep prisoners in, but they're also making a whole lot more money by keeping them in, which is a big problem. And something that we out here as taxpaying citizens and voters have to step to the plate. And I realize that there's a big stigma behind even those incarcerated coming home. Say, I was locked up, I'm coming home. But another thing that Sparkles of Joy does is encourage family members to go in. If you have somebody on the inside, communicate, contact them. Yeah, they're gonna probably try to hit you up for a package of dollars or something like that. But if you don't have it, just say, I don't have it. If you have it, share the love. But the main thing is to not be ashamed. Because these are our people just like us. They're human beings. They're human beings, and they deserve a right to justice. They deserve a right to justice. And I'm personally affected because my husband has been, this July, he goes to the parole board. He's been denied twice already. He's serving a 25 to life sentence instead of a person being sentenced. And the last thing I like to talk about is what Terrell said. Rehabilitation. The model needs to be upgraded, changed drastically. Because, but until then, we have to meet them where they're at. Our brothers and sisters that's coming out, our family members. We have to meet them where they're at and help them transition back into the community. And some people are
Movement.
Thank you.
Okay. They do that to me all the time. That's why, where's Victor? Victor said, don't talk too much. Nobody talk more than Victor, but he told me don't talk too much, so I'm not saying anything. But you're 100% right, and I thank our panelists because they're giving us some real jewels. Thus, While we're busy jamming our prisons to the rafters with young, poor black men, we are simultaneously generating the fastest rise in income equality in recent history. We are tolerating the descent of several million Americans, most of them children, into poverty, the kind of poverty that you can't come out of. Study after study shows that we become both deeper and more difficult to escape that type of poverty. Children under 18 was half, again, as likely to be poor back in 1994 than earlier than the 20 years that has passed. And more poor children are spending long stretches of their childhood or at below or in the poverty line. The poor become increasingly isolated, economically disadvantaged, and during these years, their kinfolks, the other people that they're counting on, guess what? They're living under poverty as well. At the same time, administrations cut many of our public supports, like income benefits, child protective services. They're placing everybody in a shelter. That we have impacted, we have been economic declarations, community fragments. Federal spending on jobs and job training have been cut for low-income people, dropped by more than half. But meanwhile, this is an important part. Federal spending on correctional activities rose to 500%. So what did we get out of that? Cutting programs and unemployment, you use that money to then put it into 500% in prisons. And what does that happen? As she said, our prison industrial complex is where people are actually gaining from those profits of us and continuously perpetuating the same cycle. So we're creating another type of poverty that when we're long gone, when the movement, when we talk about the Parole Act, that movement is over. When we're long gone, there'll still be several millions of people who will be suffering through poverty. So yes, we must do something about that. We must do something, and we must do something now. Movement. Sometimes when I come to these particular sessions and rallies and,